And on today's show, I've got John Coffino. John is a basketball coach, scout, and athletic mentor who has coached at every level, including head coach of the Albuquerque Thunderbirds in the NBA Development League. See what Wikipedia is not updated. The G League. Coach Coffino has also coached overseas for the last 10 years in several countries, including Spain, China, Kenya, Qatar, the Republic of Georgia, the United Kingdom, the Republic of the Maldives, and Denmark, and most recently was the head coach of IMG Academy. So welcome onto the show, John.
James, good to see you again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Oh, it's great to have you back on. And obviously, John and I did an episode way back when on episode 141. So if you haven't seen that one, do check that out. So John, obviously if we go right into the gist of it, you've coached at every level imaginable in basketball. And this is going to be a difficult question straight off the bat. Which was the most fulfilling and brought you the most joy?
I would say working in Kenya, for $70 a week. It was most fulfilling and most heart-wrenching. I actually got the job through my good friend Robbie Pierce from the United Kingdom, because we Skyped and they were looking for a coach that's going to really put his foot down on these players. And he said, there's a lot of talent, but they need guidance. And I said, you know what, I'd like to come out there. And it was a challenge for me. And I had to learn how to coach all over again because really you're starting from scratch. And I had to be a little tough on the guys in the beginning. But after a couple of weeks, they got in line and they started seeing results, and it was a major challenge being an outsider, especially in that country where there's very limited non-Africans. As I was Caucasian, and but it didn't bother me. It was just something I had to adjust to, and they were very, very nice to me, and but it was my most fulfilling, James, as you ask. I even though I wasn't getting paid really, basically, I went to try to supplement my salary by taking a coaching job, 2 coaching jobs, in at the International School of Kenya, and I got the girls and boys high school jobs, and that's when the terrorist attack on the Westgate Mall hit, and I lost my within a week of coaching them, I lost a girl. And her mother, and it was really a very, very, very somber, sad day for me and my girls. And it was another challenge that I had to overcome and try to keep the kids together, but they were hurting badly, and it was crazy times. I realized that I have to watch out for myself. My family wanted me to come home, but there was no way I was coming home. No way I was leaving my academy guys and my high school kids.
Do you think on that basis then, from your time as a scout, the African continent is still an undertapped, and it's in terms of you got the rawest form of athlete that you said, do you think that's still an untapped continent in terms of the game of basketball?
Well, I mean, it's no secret anymore. Obviously, there's quite a few Africans in not only in the NBA, but in the universities here in the States, and now they're coming into high schools, and I mean, they want an education, which is, very, very important. They want an education and they have talent. And I think that it's been very difficult and nowadays with all that's going on in the world, it's been even increased difficulty of getting visas, student visas, and coming over, but it can be done. It's just, you have to be lucky and you have to have the right people backing you up, but it's tough, and immigration is a major issue here in the United States. And but I wanted to help the kids. I mean, these kids actually wanted an education. They wanted to go to school. They wanted to get a degree and learn a trade and go back home and take care of their family and friends. So Africa is booming, and it's not just booming, but there are countries still that are untapped as far as talent goes, but the main ones are obviously South Sudan and Nigeria, and and Mali, and the Congo, and there's so many, Cameroon, but there's some countries out there that haven't really been really explored for basketball. Uganda's, I think I see Uganda as being one that's going to turn up a lot of players in the future.
Out of interest, and that's curiosity that you mentioned Uganda. Why specifically that country?
I think because of their location. For one, they're right next to Kenya, Ethiopia, South Sudan. So, and it's a country that's welcoming a lot of these, other countries into their school system. So I think the talent level is going to get higher, and the competition is going to get better. And I just think that, I know the guy Dan, Robbie Pierce's son Daniel. He's putting together a beautiful academy there. That's a year or two away, but it's going to be state of the art, and I think it's going to be a big time place for kids to start their careers.
So that moves me nicely to my next question for you then, John. In terms of, obviously, I read on your Instagram post that you shared from Huggy Bear. Why do you think the current generation are missing out by not playing on what he called, quote unquote, the blacktop, by not playing their older peers?
Yeah, I mean, my generation, Bob Huggins, he's the coach of West Virginia University, and he's a tough love kind of guy, but he's old school like me. And I grew up in the Bronx playing on the blacktop, playing on the asphalt, the concrete, which is why my feet are shot right now. I can't even step out. When I step out of bed, I can't even put my feet down. It takes a toll on you. But those were the days when people just flocked to the schoolyards, and they'd line up on the fences to play next. And if you lost, you had a long wait. And, if you won, you stayed on the court. And we also had, these centers that we'd go to at night to play. And it was nonstop. But nowadays, kids have so many other things going on, so many other distractions, including video games and computers and stuff like that. But that's what I think what he means is a lot of guys don't have that passion. They want to be good. They want to play in the NBA, but they don't want to wake up in the morning and shoot around in the schoolyard and then go home when the sun goes down and the lights are on the court. And my mother used to come looking for me, and I used to get in trouble all the time. And I played till all crazy hours in the morning, and then she stopped looking for me. She knew I was in the schoolyard. And things were good back then. Yeah, it's a shame. I wish that we had more schoolyards in not just New York. New York has so many, places, and there's a place called West 4th Street where people just go to watch the games. It's just like a little shoebox, but people play there all the time, and that's the old school, and playing on the blacktop and using the backboards, because the backboards were metal, and you had to hit the ball a certain way for it to go in. No nets and stuff like that. Sometimes we had the chain nets, but after a guy lost his finger, got caught on it with his ring, everybody stopped using chain nets. But yeah, the old days is, he's old school, and those guys don't usually change. And he's a player's coach like myself, and but he does adjust a little bit, but he misses those old times when people just run out to the schoolyard and play. You didn't have to ask.
Do you think, coming back to the earlier point that you said Africa was an untapped region, do you think that's the kind of mindset they have? They're going to use the sport to not just better their life and their family, which is the same for probably African Americans and people in the United States trying to get out of the quote unquote ghetto. But do you think they are not necessarily fixated on the destination of the NBA? They're going to use the basketball to get their education. If the basketball doesn't work out, I've still got a job, I've got a career.
I think, having traveled around the world and talked to the kids, they all have dreams of the NBA. They all have dreams of playing in college. Now with the internet, and the cable TV and everything, the kids get to see a lot of basketball from America, which is our number one sport. And, we do have a lot of talent here. There's no question about it. but I think the kids have dreams, and you never want to get in the way of their dreams and tell them that they can't. But they do want that experience, and having been around the world and seeing the situations that a lot of these kids are in, you really do appreciate where you're from, especially in the United States, where we really do have it so much better than a lot of people. And a lot of people don't know that here. They take it for granted. But when you go out in the world, and we were in Kenya in the slums, and I was in China and Georgia, and a lot of places where they just didn't have A, the facilities, or B, the equipment, and or even coaches, that wanted to, develop players. They're smart. People are smart around the world. They want to go where the action is. They want to go where they can get better. Unfortunately, I couldn't convince others to leave their situation. Some people will just never will leave, and that's okay. I mean, that's their choice. But you have to go and get the right coaching and go to the right places where you're going to get the most out of it. And I think that's what they want. They want that experience. They want to live that. And you can't fault them, and I wanted to experience, the overseas cultures, in Middle East, in Europe, and in Asia. I was everywhere, but Australia. I was never in Australia, but I was everywhere, and I got to see that, and I'm glad I did, and now I can compare. There's no place like the United States. I'm not saying it's better. It's just there's no place like it, and we really do take things for granted.
But that willingness to explore, do you think that comes back to your mindset that you mentioned in the Never Followed Trends podcast of it's not black or white. You're not going to what's the word I want to use? Discriminate on a person for their race, their religion, their creed, their gender. Do you think that's you've got an openness from the very, very beginnings of your youth then?
Maybe it's the way I was brought up, my parents, my family, but I did grow up in a schoolyard of racist people. We were a white group of guys that would go and have gang fights with other ethnic groups. And as I said in another podcast, we used to play basketball in our schoolyard. We had 8 courts. By the Parks Department put up 8 baskets. And when the African Americans and other foreigners came to to play, my racist friends tore down the rims and just left me one and put it up every time I wanted to play. And I was so upset because I really enjoyed playing with other players, especially the better ones. But I didn't see that, even though I was affiliated with this gang, and this group. I never was unable to walk through neighborhoods. Like I could walk through a black neighborhood or a Spanish neighborhood, and no one would bother me because they'd say, "Hey, that guy's cool. Don't hit him. Don't do nothing," and everything. And but I just didn't see color. I didn't. Yes, I knew they were different, but it's just like basketball, like most sports, even football in your country, it's a universal sport. So who cares? Who cares who plays, who coaches, who referees? Who cares? It's the sport that matters. Me, like I said in the other podcast, when I played in college, I was the only white kid on the team. I was the only white kid. And I got along with everybody. I had no choice, but I would have gotten along anyway. And it was a great experience for me. They accepted me. And I learned a lot about them, their cultures, their upbringings. I learned how they eat certain foods, when we went down south in the southern parts of the United States where there's certain southern style cooking and how they ate certain things with butter, with sugar. And it was really interesting, and I would have never knew that unless I played basketball. And so I'm very, very fortunate. I was fortunate to be part of not only to grow up in New York City, but to be part of a melting pot where, there's so many different cultures. And I just don't understand how we cannot coexist. And what, and it comes from our parents I think it comes from the parents who teach their kids, what's right and wrong, and education is part of it.
And when you were at university, would that be like the 1970s then?
No, I'm not that old, James. No, and I went to, actually, well, I mean, no, I finished high school in 1980.
Okay, my apologies.
I didn't go to college for a long time, 10 years. And then I decided I want to get out of the streets. I needed education. And I started going to this community college, and they said, why don't you try out for the team? I said, I'm not going to make this team. Look at these guys. And every day I would try my best. I'd run out the gym and I would vomit in the garbage can. And I stopped eating lunch during the days that we had tryouts. And the assistant coach says, hey, he wants to give you a uniform, man. You got to keep pushing through. I know it's hard. And they put me up against the fastest guys. They make me guard the best players. And I got in great shape. It was the best shape of my life. And I made the team, and I don't know. I guess, it was the early 90s, but the 70s were the racial tension, a lot of racial tension, a lot of racial riots, and not riots, wars and fights and gangs and neighborhoods. And, I was in the middle of all of that, but I was protected. I was very, very lucky, very lucky.
But obviously you mentioned that you didn't think you were good enough in the 90s. Talk to me about that mindset, because I'm surprised to hear you say that.
Well, I mean, I hadn't played organized basketball, so I didn't, I wasn't recruited by this coach. And turns out he's like one of the all-time best coaches in the country, and he's in 5 Hall of Fames, and and has 1,000 wins under his belt. And I was like, my friend said, "You're playing for him?" I go, "Yeah, I didn't know who he was." I mean, and he really took a liking to me. He's actually he turns out that his family and my family are from the same neighborhoods growing up. And so he says, yeah, ask your father about this guy and that guy and all that. And it was really cool. And then to this day, he's my mentor. To this day, he follows my career. And I'll never forget the time when he offered me the job and he said, I'm going to see you on TV someday coaching in Madison Square Garden. I'm going to see you in the NBA. I know it. I just know it. And he was right.
Do you think it took that belief from somebody else into you to revision that for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought about coaching. I love basketball since I was a child, 5, 6 years old. I always had a basketball with me. But I don't know why. I just loved it. And then I started following certain players. But coaching was not something that really even was a thought. And then one day when he offered me the job and I went home and I told my family, and my older sister, Diane, said, your ship has come in. This is it. I could see it in your eyes. I could see the passion. I could see that you've been bit by this coaching bug, your excitement. And my first year, I did all the recruiting, and we won our region, and missed going to the Nationals by 1 game, and the rest is history. I really started enjoying it, and I learned from the best. I was just lucky. I walked into that gym, into that guy's office, and had no idea who he was, and the basketball gods were sending me there for sure. The path that they gave me was not always smooth, but where they started me, I'm the luckiest guy. Anybody that coached under that guy or played under him, realizes how lucky they were and how fortunate we were to have access to his knowledge. He was amazing.
And is that something you like to obviously pass on to the next generation? Obviously, the players being willing to be a sponge from you.
Yeah, that's the name. That's the game, man. You basketball is giving you so much. You should give twice as much back. It's funny you say that. I just got an email from a former player of mine from Niagara University who wants to get into coaching, and he says, "How do I get my license? How do I get a job? What do I do?" And we sat down and I told him what to do to get his coaching license. I told him that he has to network, come work with me at some camps. you know, and I get a lot of those things. A lot of guys want to coach, and you know, when they say they want to coach, I said you should consider going to dental school instead. You know, but because it's a stressful job, but it's a good stress most of the time. The stress is really good. It's worth it, and you know, you're going to have your ups and downs, and you're going to make some great relationships, and there really is, you know, a lot to teach, and still I'm continuing to learn myself. And but you're right, I do get enjoyment out of helping others and helping the younger groups that want to get into coaching. It's not for everybody. A lot of guys don't want to pay their dues. Like the old timers, we paid our dues. You know, I mean, I coached in junior college, and I was an administrative assistant, and I was, you know, I moved up the ladder, and I paid my dues as an assistant for 14, 15 years. And then I finally got a head coaching job, and, you know, I've always been a head coach. I have no problem being an assistant either, but that's the way it's been since, you know, 15 years ago. But, you know, 13 years ago, 14. Yeah, but it's a lot of guys want to coach, but there's very few jobs, right? There's more jobs for players because there's more, you know, obviously 12, 15 on a team, but only one coach and a couple, maybe one or two assistants. So it's a very competitive profession. You have to really work hard. You have to develop an identity and show people that you're willing to, you know, put in the time. And it's like I said, it's not for everybody. If you're married with a family, sometimes that's tough. It's tough on the family because you're not coming home in the right hours, and they miss you, and they want your presence. And a lot of guys have given up the job because of that, because of their family. You know, they had to choose, and most guys chose to be, you know, to get a 9-to-5 job and come home at a reasonable hour. But again, me being single was also a plus because I could work 15, 16 hours a day and hustle and make a name for myself, which is what I did, you know, subconsciously.
And do you think that the stresses that you mentioned, John, people don't always see it because ultimately they see what the hustle and grind of the players from a playing perspective, and as social media has evolved, and this is something I kind of pushed the Joshua Phoenix to do a little bit more of, and try and copy lesser riders in terms of there's your benchmark for social media. You try and exceed that. And I think because people want to know as much as possible about the player, be it from the UK perspective for people that don't know, there's more overturn of players. So that's not, be it if we use the NBA as the long-term contract, the playing staff is going to change from year to year. So I think it enables them to get to know the player more as a person. But obviously you being the coach there as well, it was more a family.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, overseas, usually it's 1 year unless, you know, you really like it there and they like you and they want to extend your contract. And it's hard for the fans to get an attachment to these players because they're here for maybe 6 to 8 months and that's it. But you're right. It is a family type thing. It's relationships that will be with you forever. And you know, every team is different every year. Something's different about the team, and very rare that do teams have the same, literally, you know, 1 through 12 have the same rosters, you know. But one of the reasons why Leicester and Newcastle have always been so good is because of their consistency of their personnel. And but it's difficult because guys are always moving on. And but I get attached to my players. I've had some run-ins with players. I mean, if you coach long enough, you're going to have problems, and you learn how to deal with them. You know, by making mistakes. I've made you know, my share of mistakes on how I handle things and regrets. But that's part of growing. You know, part of being a strong coach, and you learn about the big picture, and hopefully down the road your relationships continue even after their careers are over, and they see things that you were trying to teach them that they're teaching to their kids, and they realize that, you were trying to send a message, and you were out looking for their own good, not trying to hurt them.
And obviously, John, your last job most recently was working at IMG, and most people would have heard of IMG Academy, be it maybe less so for the basketball, but for maybe the football program worldwide, and obviously their dealings with the NFL and that international program. Why the change from working overseas to coming to work back stateside and working? I would put it as like a prep school, but obviously it's slightly elevated from that.
Right. So I'm in Georgia, and my season's over, and I get a call from an agent, and they say, we have a national job that's available, and I want to put your name up for it. I said, that's my dream. I've never coached a national team. I don't care if it's in Siberia. And the agent says, well, you're in luck. It's in the Maldives. I go, what? You mean the Maldives with, the beautiful place? They said, yeah, it's not a great team. They're a 100% Muslim country. And so you have to, be aware of that. And I said, I don't care. I'll take it. I will take it. And I went there. And of course, having worked in Qatar, with another Muslim country, you learn that, not that I drink, which was a plus in those countries. It was a red flag in the UK when they said, you don't drink, something's wrong with you. But anyway, so and bacon too. I love bacon from England, but they didn't have bacon in the Maldives. Anyway, so I take that job, and it was just a beautiful place, and 1,200 islands. I had my own island, was basically, and so it was a place that had no bacon, no alcohol. And then I get a call after they stopped paying me. I left after Christmas, and I get this job in Denmark, which is the totally opposite of the Maldives. It's cold. Maldives was 85 every day. It's dark. Maldives was sunny every day. They have 15 million pigs in Denmark, sausage capital of the world. 5 million people, 15 million pigs. And they drink starting at the age of 14. So it was like the opposite. But I took that job, and then I left when I got the call from IMG. My friend is the director, and he said, I need a coach right away. And at the time, I was really contemplating saying, you know what, my next job I hope is in the States, because whether I go back to the G League or even coach high school, I don't care. I'm tired. I'm tired of traveling. And lo and behold, bang, I get a call. I need you to come here in 2 weeks. So I packed my bags, and we were having a good season in Denmark, and I was really, really close with the players and the people there, and such a lovely place. But I wanted to go home, and and I went home, and it was a temporary job. And I'm still down here in Florida, but it's an incredible place as far as facilities, and it's state of the art and everything, and they have lots and lots of students and lots of sports. But it gave me an opportunity to come home, and now I'm home. And I wouldn't go overseas unless it was something like Australia or Italy. It was two places that I've always wanted to coach.
So those are your dream jobs now. Looking
on my
forward.
bucket list, but it would take a lot for me to leave the States.
Was it a longing for, as what was Wizards of the Oz, because you brought it up at the beginning? There's no place like home.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen my share. I mean, there's a lot more to see around the world. Maybe when I retire, but it's good to be closer to the family. Access They really wanted me to stay home and not go overseas anymore, and I kept fighting with them, and I finally realized that they were right, but I had to do what I had to do, and it's just it'll be a nice little book that I'm writing about my travels and my time coaching everywhere, and but I've got a lot of material.
Well, I can only imagine, because it's like that little bit between the difference between the Maldives and Denmark is like polar opposites, and not a lot of, be it coaches, athletes, get to experience one extreme to the other in their
Yeah,
their
and
entire career.
I went from Africa to England. So I went from, one ethnic race to basically a predominantly white country that spoke English. So I didn't have to learn the language. It was an easy transition for me. But I've learned lots of languages, basic stuff, like, shoot, pass, come on, let's go, timeout and all that, substitution. The adjustments are, I tell coaches that want to coach overseas, you're not in America anymore. You have to adjust to their culture. You have to learn, the language. You have to accept certain things that you are used to are not going to happen, especially as a player too. The rules are differently. The style is different. There's so many other things that you have to adjust to, and these are things that you have to instill in these players that want to go overseas. It's you just can't go over there with the attitude like, well, I'm American and I'm better than you. You'll be sent home the next plane trip.
Do you think those days are long gone then, in terms of that mindset or that mentality?
Well, I mean, there are always guys that are going to go over there and think that that they're better. And they may be better, but you have to respect where you are. You have to respect who's coaching you and the people around you in the community, because if they don't like you and feel like you're not adhering to their culture, then and they usually are. They're sensitive. They like to teach you and show you around and share with you their things that they like. So it's usually most places are great like that. They'll show you around.
And you said languages; those aren't the basics, John. In terms of making it relatable to your sport, that's beyond like the basics of hello, how are you doing? Can I have this?
Right.
You've gone to use it as you want to, and I can commend you on that, because that's probably very difficult to make it specific to your, I'll use a business term, niche, in terms of making it specific to basketball, and probably the coaches themselves will respect you for it, the officials, in terms of you've gone out of your way to learn that language to be able to communicate.
Yeah, it does help. It also helps, if they're talking about you and you know what they're saying, But I always used to get upset when the person can speak English, yet they spoke the language because they didn't want you to know what they were saying, But but it does. I mean, the more words you know, the better you're off. There's no question about it. It does help you blend in. Like you said, especially with the basketball specific terminologies and stuff like that. But I'm here in the States. I got a new gig, and I'm going to start in August, and I'm very excited about it. So we're going to announce it soon. But it's a beautiful place, and it's a prep school that I'm really excited to go to.
And obviously, the era that you've kind of progressed through with your playing career and your coaching career, how have you adapted to the modern times of the impact of social media then?
Wow, that's true. I mean, it does save you a lot of time. There are some pluses with social media, but there are some dangers too. I mean, back in the old days, we'd have to, if you couldn't talk on the phone, you'd have to get in the car or go and meet the person, talk to them face to face, which was probably the best thing, because you could see that person and who you're talking to. And now you could just send an Instagram message or a tweet or, a messenger, and all these other different ways of communicating has made it a lot, I wouldn't say easier, but more convenient. I like the face-to-face talks because I want to see who I'm talking to. I want to get an impression. But it does. But again, it has its drawbacks. Like when I was in the NBA, a player that I gave a spot to. We only had 10 spots, and I gave this one player who was from the Bronx, who I knew, and I cut this other player, and I wasn't playing him. And my friend, now this is the early days of Twitter, and my friend calls me up and says, "Have you seen Twitter lately?" I said, "No." He goes, "Well, someone's taking shots at you, and you should see this." And I said, "Well, send it to me." And sure enough, he was saying stuff that I wasn't playing him, and and the NBA fined him, right? And I cut him, and I took the kid that should have been in that spot, and that kid made the NBA. So it was great.
Does that bring you ultimate joy then to for the decision that you made? That person probably took it full-heartedly and thank you very much. I'm going to now repay you in probably 10 times. Ultimately, they probably don't know that, but it's like, well, the faith that you showed in me, I'm going to show my true potential.
Well, I had promised him. I said, the first spot that's open, I'm going to bring you on board. I'm going to bring you. And he was such a good kid. And when the Denver Nuggets called me up and said, "Hey, John, tell me what kind of person this kid is. Is he coachable? Is he this? Is he that?" Because I have J.R. Smith, and I can only handle one of J.R. Smith's. And it was like, nah, man, he's never once given me a problem. Never once. And he plays so hard. You will love him. And he did. And, I would never endorse a player if, with my reputation on the line and say, yeah, he's a good kid when he wasn't. And then he shows his true colors and they say, "Hey, John, you said he was a good guy and you lied, and we don't trust you anymore." So you can't do that.
Do you think, obviously, that's how you've been brought up in terms of honesty, integrity, transparency? Do you think that's lacking in the modern world then a little bit? That people are a little bit, I'm trying to use, what would be the word? Not show the true facts in terms of there'd be some sort of honesty, but we won't show you everything.
Yeah, it's weird with me because I'm a private person, yet I am very outgoing and I'm very transparent. And I think there's a lack of transparency now in this culture. I think people do not want to show their hands. And I think, to me, if you're honest, I will respect you more than if you withhold something for no reason, but to keep your, power or something like that, knowledge of that power. Yeah. I just think there's a lack of transparency and a fear of being exposed. But I'll tell people straight up, like players that I'm going to recruit, I'm telling them that I'm a new coach. I'm a new coach at this place. This is what I expect. This is what, I'm looking for. This is the type of player I want. If you're that type of player and you want to be pushed and you want to develop and get better and you don't mind criticism privately and public praise, then I'm your coach, and otherwise, there's plenty of other schools out there that'll consider you. But I don't always usually recruit the most talented players.
Why is that for you specifically then?
Well, I've had my share of winning. I've won at a few places, and it's great. It's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to continue to try to win. But I think now at my stage, it's more important to help develop the youth basketball and help them move on, move up the ladder and get better. And not only get better in the physical aspect of the game, basketball, but also the mental aspect. And life too, you want to teach life lessons. I remember one time, early in my career, one of my players was falsely arrested, and I had to be a character witness. And the solicitor, as you would say, said to me, "Do you ever talk to your player about anything else but basketball? About other things in life?" And I had to be honest, and I said, "No, we haven't really discussed much." And it was that really opened my eyes, saying, "You know what? I should know more about my players without being nosy." And she put me on the spot, and I really it opened my eyes, and I became a player's coach, and I want my players to realize that I will always be there for them through thick and thin. I've been called 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 in the morning to come help, get me out of here, get me out of there. And I would never say no. But that doesn't mean I'm going to condone any, misbehaving either. You break a rule, you break a rule. I've had to, discipline some of my best players. Everybody, it applies to everybody.
Do you think that transition, John, has happened because of that aforementioned example, that you, before that, it was more black and white, as you're a private person, I expect the players to probably be very similar and like-minded, so there has to be a divide between basketball and life, and having that obviously situation arise, there needs to be no intangibles. It's very much, there's no alter ego, there's no Batman and Bruce Wayne, there's no persona in terms of, and this is probably where people, don't get me wrong, have the essence of putting athletes on a pedestal. It's like, well, when we're no different than the average person on the street, it's just we're wired slightly differently in that arena that is our profession, be it basketball, soccer, whatever sport you play, and we might have a little bit of shortcoming somewhere else, but be it you put them together and make the person kind of be honest with themselves and be transparent, as you're John, I'm James, and this is what makes me as the individual, the basketball, the education, and all that comes in. That just, it's like a nice present, and that situation has brought that to the fore with you, that there can't be any difference. There need to be conversations outside of basketball, non-related to it, and then obviously when it's time to go, this is what we talk about in practice, and especially games. It's focused around the game plan and obviously ultimately winning, because that's what sport is about, winning or losing. But I think there's the life lessons as well that you mentioned.
I think, you have to instill in the players respect and loyalty and honesty. A lot of coaches say my door's always open, but that's not always true. And I think you have to prove it to the guys. And once you break that barrier and they feel that they can come to you for anything, then your relationship becomes a lot stronger. There is a line that you have to draw between friendship and player-coach. It's not a popularity contest. It's not, hey, you're my buddy. Why are you benching me? Like that. You can't, because you have to tell them, listen, you're here to play, be a member of this team, to contribute to the team's success. No individual stuff. It's all about teamwork. And I'm constantly instilling that. There are some selfishness out there, but you have to break that barrier. You have to be the one. You should know better. You should know. Show the kid loyalty. Show the kid tough love. Show him that you're honest and you mean what you say. You can't say something one day and then do something different the other day. They don't forget, and you have to expect the same in return. Once you instill that in them, and you'll get it in return, and then your relationship really, like I said, really becomes stronger, and they'll do anything for you.
So talk about, and obviously for those that didn't listen to our previous episode that we did, because we talked about a lot of your time in the UK on that episode. Talk to me of that time in the UK in terms of how you hit the ground running. Obviously, they've had it in different seasons, probably before and after since you've left, which is probably for a lot of the fan base quite difficult to have a team of our team, because I saw some of the teams, some of the games that you put together, but the caliber of athletes and team you were able to assemble, the league were kind of, probably at first it's like, well, this is never going to work. This is going to implode. How did you kind of keep all those egos in check based on the facilities, kind of being from a small area in the UK versus the big towns that we mentioned earlier in the episode of Newcastle and Leicester? how did you make that them coexist and buy in to a relatively unknown for most of those players?
Yeah, well, it wasn't easy, because we were all kind of first year new to the United Kingdom and English basketball and British basketball, and I was learning on the fly. And like you said, but by the end of the year, I kind of knew how things worked, but I had a lot of contacts. I still do with that, and there was a lot of talent that I've been associated with, and I had to convince the players too to come because the salaries weren't astronomical, except for maybe one or two. But basically, they came because of my relationship with them, and it wasn't easy. It was a challenge, when you have talent, because to get them to buy into the team concept. But we won 26 games, and we were a shot away from making the finals, and it was really, really, I was really excited about the year. I wish I could have stayed longer, and I feel like I had unfinished business there, but I made a lot of friends and relationships, and I still follow the league. I follow the team, and things have changed a little bit. Some haven't. But it was great experience, and the only regrets I have is how I handled certain things that came up during the year. But that's how a season goes. Nothing ever goes smoothly. It is your peaks and valleys, and you have ups and downs. And unfortunately, we had some issues we had to deal with, but we fought through it, and we persevered. And I think that was a sign of the players because they were much more older and mature. We had older guys, and so. They helped me out a lot, just as much as I helped them.
Well, I think people got to see your true character on television as well, and people not in the UK can watch some of those games on YouTube, and you give probably your real character over the microphone as well. And then some of those games were quite interesting to listeners. What was your take on teams that obviously you weren't coaching, and kind of what's from when you are asked to commentate or analyze a game, what kind of hats do you wear? Because obviously you're going to scout a little bit subconsciously.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be honest. You want to give the audience knowledge on what's going on from a coaching perspective. You don't want to show favoritism to one or the other teams. You just want to give a neutral perspective, and I enjoyed it. Of course, having Dan, Dan do the play-by-play. He was easy to work with, and I didn't want to, talk over him or interrupt him, and I wanted to let him do his thing. And when it was my time to speak, I would. But yeah, it was good. It was a free scouting trip for me, and to see two teams, and but also share with the British basketball, fans that. The way I was viewing the game, and I hope it helped. If I was funny, I was funny, but that's my natural personality, but it was very enjoyable, and it was something that I like doing.
Is that something you'd like to venture in after you decide to finally hang up the suit then?
People have asked me that, I had a radio show when I was in the NBA Development League. I had my own talk show. I did commentating for the NCAA March Madness for ESPN, but that was radio. I don't know. I would consider it. I just, one of my sisters years ago said I should do it. But it's not for everybody. I would be brutally honest. That's all. I would be brutally honest. If a person made a mistake, I would say, I would call them out on it. So that's. But I'm not finished coaching. My next job, at this prep school is hopefully my last job, and unless something major comes up, like an NBA job or something. But I have no plans on going anywhere. I want to settle down somewhere and just coach for the next 10 years or so or longer. It's what I want.
Do you think, and it comes back, and we've mentioned honesty quite a lot in the episode, do you think the current climate that we live in can sometimes not be able to deal with you being brutally honest?
That's the problem. The problem is some people tell players what they want to hear, and it doesn't really help them down the road. And you have to know that if you tell them what they need to hear, they may not like it. I'll give you an example. I would always go to my oldest brother Michael for advice, or if I was in a situation and I needed his help. And I knew he was going to say things that I might not be comfortable or agree with or like, but I knew he was being honest. So I always listened. And I thought about what he said. Was he right? Most times. But I always listened because I knew I was getting an honest assessment. He wasn't, making things up. He would give me compliments when he had to, but he would also be very, very critical, and in an educational way, constructively. And so that's what I learned to do. And you have to, but you're right. As the generations go and each new one comes in, you have to think things change. Look at how sensitive people are now. Look at how politically correct you have to be. Back in the old days, you can grab a guy by the shirt. Some coaches smack guys. Well, obviously, that'd be wrong then and wrong now, but I'm just saying how things have changed. You can't even look at a kid the wrong way. If you don't play a kid, you get in trouble. There's a lot of things now that just have changed, and either you adjust or you stick to your old ways and see if that works. But it's a new phenomenon, James. And parents are a part of it. They're a part of the phenomenon. I'm not saying they're a bad part of it. I'm just saying that they're a part of it. More than ever, more involved. At games, filming, cheering. Talking to the coaches more. It's just something that if you're teaching a young coach, they're going to have to learn how to deal with that this new part of the coaching.
Do you think it comes down to, you talked about adaptability there, like pivoting a little bit, using like boxing, dodge and weave, quick feet, in terms you've got to obviously do like you did with you in the UK, coach on the fly sometimes, and then obviously preparation is key, where you can do your homework ahead of time to obviously keep yourself out of those predicaments. Obviously, each to their own in terms of whether or not you play somebody. I coached the old school way. You earn the minutes that you get,
right,
and it's up to you to gain more. Probably that goes against the popular culture we live in, whereas I talked about even the most recent episode about competition and comparison of most people, even my generation. But why is that person starting ahead of me? I'm better than them.
Right.
So ultimately, and we talked about, that's for you as the player to seek you out as the coach, to become vulnerable. What do I need to do to get better, to get more playing time? And ultimately, that takes some guts to do that.
It does. It takes integrity. And, a lot of coaches possess integrity. Some are just blinded by just winning at all costs, no matter what. And I think the big picture is, what lessons are we teaching these players? That it doesn't matter if you're talented or not, But the old school coach will reward effort. He won't reward talent. Talent is great. Effort is to me more important, and talent with effort you got yourself a really good player and a good team. And you have that. When you combine the two, a talented team that plays hard for you and smart, you're going to win a lot of games. So you won't have to worry about the winning. But the big picture is, what lessons are you teaching? If it's say it's okay, you're talented, but you don't work hard in practice, it's okay. To me, that don't work. You're not going to play. If that's the way it is. Now in the NBA, it's different. In the NBA, you have to win. It's all about trophies and championships and stuff like that. And in college too. I mean, NCAA. Unfortunately, you get 3, 4, 5-year contracts, but if you don't win, your career is cut short. But to me, the ultimate coach is a guy that develops players physically, mentally, gets them to buy into the program, the team concept, and wins also. I mean, it can be done.
So how do you
bring in the right people?
So how do you keep people to stay hungry? And obviously, I watched an HBO documentary of the women of Troy. Obviously, that's the USC women's program. They were ruthless, but a lot of them came from inner city, LA, Compton, and things like that. How do you get every ounce of sweat from that individual, no matter where they come from, be it from the hood, suburbia, and you name it? How do you get people to get the every ounce of that person?
First of all, I remember when they were filming that. I was out there. And my friend is the coach at USC, Jason Glover. He's associate head coach of the Women of Troy. And what's amazing about women's basketball is it's a lot better than people give credit. It's really good basketball. And unfortunately, they're not as athletic as men, not as tall and dunk the ball and all that. But it's a good brand of basketball. In fact, the WNBA is playing at IMG this summer. They're using IMG as the venue. Now, getting to your question, how do you get them to stay hungry? Very simple. I would always get on my players more when we won than when we lost. Your team is down after a loss. Okay, you let the smoke clear. Maybe you have a meeting, talk about some things, but you don't beat them up. You really stay on top of them when they win, because how you handle winning is just as important as how you handle losing. And so I would challenge my players. I would challenge my team. The next game is what? And they would all answer me the same answer. The biggest game of the year. The next game is the biggest game of the year. After this game is over, I'd say to them in closing in the locker room, changing room, when's the next biggest game? Next game. And it's all about communication. You don't just talk to the team, but you talk to the individual, about it. Say, listen, you did this, and this last game. This is what you got to do even more. You got to the foul line 5 times. Get to the foul line 7 times. I challenge you. Challenge them. Give them goals, short-term goals. Put it on them. Are you pleased with the way you played? 100%? No. Okay. Well, let's see after the next game. You come back to me and tell me how pleased you are when you look in the mirror and say, how was your effort? How did you play defense? Did you rebound? Let's revisit. And so you put these ideas in their heads and you make them think about it. You put it on them. And say, self-evaluate, so you have to self-evaluate. And so I challenge my players, especially when they're successful, more so, because human nature is you drop your guard a little bit when you win, right? You're like, you're not thinking about, well, we just lost, we won. I can take it easy. That's human nature. But if you have this mindset where the next game is the biggest game, or I'm going to play better than I did last game, because you can never play 100% satisfactory. You can never give 100% of everything you got. Otherwise, you see people passed out on the floor. Do you see many people passed out on the floor? No, I don't see many people passed out on the floor. So you can't say you gave it your all. So you try, and you try pushing them that way. It is a lot from the neck up. You know, it's a psychological game you play with them, but it's also a challenge, and hopefully they'll buy into it.
And the buy-in from that, John, is it irrespective of the levels you've played at? It didn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Although the higher level you go, you would think that you have to motivate them less, but it's not true. And I think every level has its similarities, and motivation is one of them. Teaching and skill work still at the highest level. There's guys that have not been taught certain things that need to improve on basic stuff, fundamentals. You think NBA guys, okay, yeah, they're talented. They made the show. They made the big league. They don't need to work on their game. Well, that's baloney. Everybody, you're constantly teaching. The minute you stop trying to improve, that's when you leave the game, right? As a coach and as a player. So don't think that they don't need work at the highest level, because they do. We all know they need it at the lowest level, at the grassroots, and we all know that they need to not only work on their skills, but their mindset, their mental aspect, their attitude, their habits, getting rid of some of their bad habits, showing up on time, looking at the coach when he's talking to you, paying attention.
Oh, yeah, but that's respect. Ultimately, I've given you my full attention for what are we now, over an hour. That comes back to respect and upbringing a little bit.
When someone asks you what's your team rules, and I say basically, well, it revolves around one word, and that's respect. If you have respect for yourself, for your family, for your team, your teammates, the referee, your coach, the game, the community, that one word covers everything. The minute you break that respect is when you break a rule. So respect can go a long way.
But is there any punishment or repercussions for breaking one of those rules?
If you're going to make rules, you're going to have to enforce them. So you keep it basic. I'm going to treat you like men or women. The minute you don't act like it, then I have to deal with it. Don't put me in that spot to deal with it. I do not want to do that. I don't want to have to, discipline you. But if I have to, I will. And I'll do it the first day of practice. Because if you don't do it the first day of practice and you try to do it the 10th day of practice, say, hey, I've been doing it for 9 more other days. How come you didn't say anything? You can't discipline me now. You let me get away with it. He's right. She's right. So you got to jump on it early. You have to set the example. But if you don't have to, you don't have to. That's great. But there are going to be times when you have to, do something that's, unfavorable or, they don't agree with. But you're the boss. You're the leader.
So my penultimate question to you, John, is if you got to sit down with any athlete, dead or alive, or even coach, on that matter, and got to pick their brains, who would that be and why?
Okay. The guy cutting the grass outside sounded you out. What if I could coach anyone?
If you could sit down with anybody, coach or athlete, dead or alive, who would that be and why?
Well, I would like to sit down with Larry Bird. And it was a point where I would love to sit down with Greg Popovich, because I thought he's really a player's coach. And maybe I still would, but he's getting a little too political for my taste. Not that I'm a Trump guy, I'm not, but I'm not anything. But, if you're not anti-Trump, then there's something wrong with you. And so I don't agree. I don't like to get into politics, but I'd like to pick his brain, basketball wise. There's Phil Jackson. There's a bunch of guys that I would love to pick their brain. And I have some NBA coaches that are my mentors, like Bob Hill. He's my mentor, basically. I always tell him what I'm doing, and he's honest. He's supportive. He's critical. He's kind of like my brother. My brother's the same way, But Bob Hill has been a coach for 5 NBA teams. He's head coach for 5 NBA teams, and so I always call him and try to bounce things off him.
And my last question before we wrap up the episode, John, if you have to summarize what we've been speaking about, and I know that's going to be quite difficult in about 70 minutes that we've been speaking, into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
It's better to be yourself than to be someone else. Be yourself. I don't want to say more sentences, but it's better to be yourself than to try and be someone else.
Once again, John, thanks again for coming on the Mindset Athlete podcast.
Thanks, James. I enjoy it. You're a gracious host and easy to talk to. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's my pleasure.